Good morning, or afternoon, or whenever you're watching this. We're doing Chapter 14 in Drug Society and Human Behavior, DAAC 1304, Pharmacology. And this chapter is about psychedelics and psychedelia and all of that good mind-expanding, spiritual awakening kind of things that you get from these types of drugs. That are tied in very heavily with magic and religion and things like that, and has been since the dawn of mankind. Even before recorded history, there's evidence that humankind were familiar with these type substances and used them for pretty much medicinal and recreational and for spiritual reasons. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today and what the drugs are and how they affect people and that sort of thing. So we're going to go right on over to that, and I'm going to share my screen and go over and get us a PowerPoint. And away we go. This is a variation of Amanita muscaria, the magic mushroom of the Arctic Circle, which we will start and pretty much end with this drug today, and have a little fun with the things in between. But this is Amanita is probably the only drug that they had in Lapland in this part of the world until the Russians got there with vodka and taught them about other types of intoxicants. Mescalamine is the active psychoactive agent that you find in this. And it's a pretty unique drug, but we'll talk about that later. One pill makes you larger, one pill makes you small, and the ones your mother gives you don't do anything at all. Go ask Alice when she's 10 feet tall. That's for Jefferson Airplane and Grace Slick's anthem to psychedelia, White Rabbit. It also has the lyric, when you go chasing rabbits and you know you're going to fall, tell them all the hookah smoking caterpillar has given you a call for Alice when she is just small. Seems that Lewis Carroll and Grace Slick both had more than a passing acquaintance with psychedelics. And Lewis Carroll is the author, of course, of Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There. And also Alice in Wonderland, which he wrote for his niece, actually. It involved adventures of a little girl who chased a rabbit down a rabbit hole and wound up in Wonderland. Alice experienced symptomologies of altered states, and Alice went through some altered states, as a matter of fact. If you'll recall, if you're familiar with the book, you may remember how Alice got small and how Alice got tall. Tall. You remember how she accomplished that feat of growing to gigantic proportions and shrinking to Lilliputian ones? Yep, absolutely, you're correct. She had a mushroom cap in her apron pocket, and when she wanted to be tall, she bit one side of it, and when she wanted to be on an eye level with with house cat, she bit the other side, and it would shrink her down to a small size. These are conditions that you may experience in an altered state. You'll see that micropsia is experiencing oneself or things in one's environments much smaller than they actually are, and having a spatial distortion. Macropsia is the opposite. That's experiencing oneself or things in one's environment is much larger than they are, another spatial distortion. You can also get synesthesia, the blending of senses, where your senses are not coming through the right way. Seeing, when someone says a word, you see it come pulsing across the room, and in Technicolor. You can smell colors, you can taste sounds when you're in this particular state. And altered perceptions equal altered states equal altered perceptions. This is plus lysergic acid diethylamide, or plus hyoscyamine, or plus ayahuasca, or plus any of the other hallucinogens that we'll be looking at today. So that's how that works. Aldous Huxley, the writer of Brave New World, also wrote The Doors of Perception, in which he explored the notion of changing oneself and altering oneself spiritually through drug use. And there was plenty of drug use in Brave New World as well. But his quote, if the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite. And this isn't a new concept that Huxley, articulate as he was, accidentally ran into or on purpose discovered and decided to articulate in his inimitable way so that all the rest of us could enjoy it. This idea has been laying around out there as long as there are human beings, and we have sought to move outside ourselves, to connect to something bigger, to interact with a world that's parallel to our world or enmeshed with our world. And that's the spirit world, the thing that comes before, the thing that comes after, the thing that's bigger than we are. This is also the original name of Jim Morrison's band, The Doors of Perception, which was later just shortened to The Doors. Psychedelics refers to hallucinogens, basically, to substances or experiences or things that alter these perceptions for us. Many of the psychedelics that are used by human beings are plant derivatives, and especially in more primitive cultures who lack the technology for laboratories and that sort of thing. Some hallucinogens can be derived from animals, like bufotenin from amphibians. All psychedelics alter brain functioning, producing hallucinatory episodes to a greater or to a lesser degree. This was a poster that was popular in the late 60s and 70s. My younger brother had one of these. My mother totally objected to the term "eat me" on the top of his poster, which was referring to the mushroom, which is what this little insect is doing while it's sitting on top of it. And eating this mushroom is about producing hallucinogenic events so that you can trip for a while. Mom didn't make that connection. She made this connection, and she didn't like it much. Well. She didn't like some of mine either. In the beginning, and these are drugs that have been around with us for a long time, animism is something that is a way of believing. It's a religious belief. It's more primitive than modern, although there are plenty of incidences of animism being relative to modern belief systems. And that's what's going on over here on the right. You've got religious, you've got religious practices going on, and you've got healing practices going on. Of course, you have the priest, delivering communion to the nun up there. She's eating the flesh of Christ, of course. And down below, you have Siberian shamans doing a healing, and over here, an Indian of the Pacific Northwest also doing a healing. and you can see that they have the religious icons in the back with that guy, the totem poles. And the totem poles represent family relationships and also travel gods and that kind of thing. When the priest, by the way, in the old Catholic faith, if you ask a Catholic today, when you go to church, do you actually eat the flesh of Jesus Christ and then drink his blood? They'll say no. When I take communion, I have, the wafer that represents the flesh of Christ, and then I have the wine that represents the blood of Jesus and the atonement and accepting Christ as my Savior and joining the family. Happy are we who are called to this feast, and all of that kind of stuff. In the traditional faith, going way, way back, when the priest blesses the wine and the bread, it's no longer wine and bread. Through a process of belief and faith and magic called transubstantiation, that the host doesn't represent anything. It is the flesh of Jesus. It is the blood of Christ. And so if you ask someone who is classical in their belief system that way, or traditional in their belief system, yes, when I take communion, I eat the flesh of Christ. I drink the blood of Christ. And that's what, determines me in terms of my faith. That's not such a departure from animistic beliefs. Animism believes that there's spirit in everything, that there's God in everything. There's every bit as much God in an intestinal parasite as there is in a human being. God is in the trees, the woods, the rocks, the sky, the air, everything. There is no separating the spirit world from the physical world because they're one and the same. In northern Mexico and southwestern United States, Texas particularly, the magic mushroom that grew down here, the psilocybin, was referred to in the Nahuatl language as Teonanacatl, or God's flesh. And if you eat God's flesh, you see with God's eyes. You see the world the way it really is, the spiritual world. This particular mushroom, peyote, ayahuasca, tobacco, cocaine, alcohol, have all been used in religious faiths and for religious purposes. And this is a thing that we shouldn't forget, by the way. There are around 500 gods or so, give or take a few, being worshipped in the world today. And every single one of them is the one and only true religion, just in case you're wondering, for the believers. And when you look at this and think nonsense, no, it's not nonsense. It's an organizing principle of reality. It's people's religion. It's people's faith, which it helps them define themselves, to see who they are in the world and to interact with it. The use of these psychedelic substances, these perception-altering substances, are a way for people to open themselves up to spiritual or otherworldly experiences. And not the only way, certainly, but a way. A good friend of mine and mentor of mine, the late Spencer Andrews, an old dumpster diving hippie from back in the Haight, and said that without LSD, he'd never been able to come to God. He had never been able to open himself up to the possibility that there were other worlds like that there was another way of, that there was a way of interacting and believing that would be tangible and useful to him. But it's not required. You don't have to drop acid to see God, or to hear God, or to feel God, or at least that's what people tell me. And there's all kinds of varieties of religious experiences. This one and this one are every bit as valid as that one, just saying. And speaking of churches and faiths, this is Quanah Parker. He's the last chief of the Quahati Comanche. He's the son of Peta Nakona of the Quahati and the white captive Sarah Parker, who was married to Peta Nakona. And this is one of the most interesting men in American history, in my estimation. He's born and lives the first part of his life as a Stone Age warrior. That's who he was. He didn't know anything about the white man's God. He didn't know anything about European American culture, that kind of thing, even though his mother was captured as a young girl and raised among the Comanche. He made a transition from being a Stone Age warrior to a modern statesman and a successful businessman and rancher. And one of the founders of the Native American Church. And Quanah was a peyoteero. That means that he did peyote, which is an hallucinogenic cactus that grows in the Southwest. His quote here is that the white man goes into his church house and talks about Jesus, but the Indian goes into his teepee and talks to Jesus. Which is an entirely different thing. The beliefs of the Native American Church, and I'm not trying to turn this into a comparative religions class, is basically a blend of the old ways of the tribal gods and belief systems that the Comanche have practiced for centuries, and the other native tribes too, because this is not a particularly tribal belief system. But it encompasses the animistic beliefs of the indigenous it encompasses all the beliefs of the indigenous peoples here and blends it with modern Christianity. And that's not something that should be surprising to us or even foreign to us. I mean, the Aztec, the Tuhultec, the Incas, the Mayans, the Toltec, all of them have incorporated their old beliefs with the saints of the Catholic Church. So you get a particularly Latin flavor across Mexico and Central America and things like that with the European belief system of Catholicism. At the same time that Quanah was making a shift from Stone Age warrior to modern businessman and statesman, there was a Paiute Messiah named Wovoka who started the ghost dance movement across the United States among the native tribes. Now, this is about the time the Indian Wars are ending, and to call them wars are giving them more dignity than they deserve. It's, a modern industrialized people making war on little tribal entities that exist as nations of their own all across the country. It's kind of Bambi versus Godzilla. So Wovoka started a ghost dance movement in which he taught resurrection. And if the people believed and if they danced and worshiped hard enough, then the earth would roll back and all the buffalo would return and all the Indians that had been killed before would be alive again and the Europeans would disappear from the continent. And it didn't work, by the way. And though all it called for was belief, prayer, and dancing, the religion still scared the hell out of white people and resulted in a few more massacres before the Indian Wars were put to rest. So Quanah was a big mover and shaker in the establishment of the Native American Church in the United States, but he still encouraged his people to accept the white Christ, as did his son, White Parker, who later became a minister, as a matter of fact, and his son, Baldwin, also became a Christian in his last days. Psychedelics and witchcraft, Christianity and witches go hand in hand. They're like frickin' frack, night and day, black and white, right? These are the weird sisters of a production of Shakespeare's play, Macbeth. By the pricking of my thumb, something wicked this way comes. Shakespeare, Macbeth, Act 4, Scene 1. And these weird sisters are integral to the play. They're a linking device that links what Macbeth is doing, to prophecy and to magic and all of this kind of good stuff. And they're always brewing something. They got that kettle going. Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. For a charm of powerful trouble, like a hell broth, boil and bubble. They scared the hell out of me. They perform well. This is a very scary scene. Sex, drugs, and broomsticks, black masses, and flying potions. All of this is tied in with psychedelia. Happy Samhain, Dia de los Muertos, All Saints' Days, and Halloween. They're all the same time. They're October 31st and November 1st. Samhain is a Gaelic festival. It's the first day of winter. It's a harvest festival when you're bringing in all the plenty and you've got enough to make it through the winter, and it's a day of feasting. Dia de los Muertos is one of the most beautiful holidays in the Americas, in my estimation. I absolutely love the idea that you build altars where you can share a holiday with the dead, with the people that you loved and are no longer with you. You put out things that remind you of them. It's just a beautiful holiday. It's also All Saints' Day. And All Saints' Day, All Hallows' Day, is a celebration of all of the saints in Christendom. And Halloween is a day that you can put on masks and go out. There are some folks, and they may be in my audience too, and I'm not meaning to insult you, but that believe that Halloween is somehow some kind of anti-Christian festivity or something. And that's not true. There's absolutely nothing more Christian than Halloween. Armed with your faith in God, the evil forces that roam about you cannot harm you. You can put masks on and make fun of them, and they can't harm you because you're under the protection of your Lord and Savior, right? So nothing wrong with Halloween. A black mass is also held around this time. This is a religious holiday. These are religious holidays that are not just celebrated in Christendom. They go back, pagan rituals that pre-exist Christianity, native rituals that pre-exist Christianity, the old faiths that pre-exist Christianity. The witches around the cauldron in Macbeth are putting in all kinds of things. Maw of a shark, tooth of a wolf, liver of a blaspheming Jew, fingers of a stillborn child. All of these things are put into a potion along with henbane and hand of glory and other intoxicants, hallucinogenic intoxicants, and they're boiled down to a scum. You don't drink a flying potion. It'd be a very bad idea. But the scum becomes like a salve or a grease, and you smear the grease on the participants' bodies and smear them on a broomstick, and then they would ride the broomstick around the fire while they're doing their black mass. Hallucinogens will be absorbed through the skin and through the vaginal mucosa. In addition to altering perceptions, they cause rapid rises and falls in blood pressure and give the individual an out-of-body sensation of leaving your body and of flying. There's physical reasons that this would happen when you use the substance in this way. So they're not really flying? No, you don't build a flying potion and smear it on your naked body and then ride your broomstick around the fire and take off. It's a head trip. It's a perceptual thing that goes on. Hence witches on broomsticks. Well, witches are dangerous, right? Maybe if they got flying potions all over them, naked and armed with a broomstick, I could see where that could be possibly dangerous. But they're not as dangerous as the superstitious people who hunt them. And witch hunt has become kind of a term for persecution. We've heard this a lot, by the way, over the last 4 years. I'm not waxing political, by the way. I'm just saying that for 4 years when we turn on the television, we hear about it's a witch hunt, there's a witch hunt, witch hunt, witch hunt, witch hunt. And when you say witch hunt, it kind of delegitimizes the process. It means when you have a witch hunt, you've already decided that a person is guilty. You've already decided that something that nefarious has happened with them, and you go out and you go out and basically find proof or manufacture proof for what you've already decided they've done, whether they've done it or not. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Some bicyclists were riding by. And I'm looking out my open garage door. Squirrel. Anyway, this is the Malleus Maleficarum, which is a handbook on how to identify witches and what to do with them when you find them. It was written by a Jesuit priest by name of Heinrich Kramer. And Malleus Maleficarum means the hammer of witches. And Springer, another priest by name of Jakob Springer, was listed as an author beginning in 1519. This was published in 1484, prior to the discovery of the New World. Columbus hadn't even made it to the Caribbean yet. And this is a book that tells you what to look for and how to determine if your neighbor is a witch. It also set the stage for how the church viewed women for centuries and what was taught in the Christian religion about women for centuries. And the first thing you look for to determine if your neighbor's a witch, well, first, she's a woman. And a woman, according to Kramer and the Catholic Church of the day, is a daughter of Eve who seduces men away from righteousness and seduces them to sin and to ruin. A little disclaimer, don't blame the instructor. He didn't write it. Kramer did. The mouth of the womb is never filled. She can't control her impulses. And her impulses are to lead men astray. She's a daughter of Eve who brought about the downfall of humanity, right? Well, wait, there was a talking snake. Well, yeah, but Eve's the one who made the decision, here, I'm going to give this apple to my husband. And away we go. And we've suffered for it ever since. So checklist, if you're going to check and see if your neighbor's a witch. First, she's a woman. 2, she has a familiar. A familiar is an animal that's really not an animal. It's a demon. And it may even be the devil himself in an incarnation This is a helper who helps her in her nefarious deeds and her spells and her horrible things that she does to her neighbors. The witch has a witch's tit, which is an extra nipple of sorts. We'll talk about that later. And apparently this is what this woman is pointing to here. Here it is. And that could be a mole, that could be a wart, that could be a skin tag, any of that. She consorts and fornicates with the devil and with other demons. That's, what's the fun of being a witch if you can't fornicate with animals and demons and, stuff like that? She looks like flesh and blood, but she's really made of wood. That's one variation of why water rejects witches. There are other variations. She puts spells on people. She curses them and puts them under spells and causes them to do things that they wouldn't otherwise do. She rides a broomstick. And about 1 million other things. And although they're showing this painting has a relatively young women, older women were far more likely to be accused of being a witch, especially if she was a widow or someone who had never been married, someone who dabbles in herbs and traditional curings. That's a witch because, even though she does good things for the village, she's a witch, and we can't have witches. And about 1 million other things that can be hysterically applied to about 1 million other people. There are proofs that you can come up with to demonstrate that a person is a witch. One of my favorite scenes, and there's a movie that I love, I've seen it many times, it's called Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And it's about the Britons of King Arthur's time. And there's a scene in there where the woman's being accused of being a witch, and they've got a long fake nose tied on to her, and she says, I'm not a witch. This isn't even really my nose. And everyone there is trying to bring proof against her. And they decide that, if she weighs more than a duck, then, she's not a witch. And she doesn't. And witches won't drown because they float, because they're like what? Like wood. So one of the one of the accusers, also an eyewitness accuser, says she turned me into a newt, and everybody stopped and looked at him, and he says, "Well, I got better," So these wild accusations are flying, and the Monty Python group is making serious fun out of it, but this was serious trial evidence in the 1600s, in the 1500s, in the 1400s, back to the Middle Ages. Witch swimming. If she doesn't drown, she's a witch. Put her in the river, tie her up, throw her in the river. If she doesn't drown, we'll pull her out and burn her because she's a witch. If she does drown, we'll give her a Christian burial because we were wrong and she's innocent and her soul's with God now. Eyewitnesses are wonderful. We saw her fornicate with a stranger. We saw her do that. And then when she got through, she got up and the stranger she was fornicating with turned back into her cat or her goat or her horse or her dog or whatever. And then when she was found guilty, this is lovely. When she was found guilty, the accusers got to divide up her stuff. There was a financial incentive in that in many cases. And the poor cat, dog, rabbit, horse, goat, whatever, was hanged with her. Run, kitty. Witches also can't recite scripture, so you can assign them to recite a scripture, and they're supposed to know it. If I require you right now to recite Leviticus 3:14 to 18, can you do it? Yeah, me either. But you better not make a mistake, witch. Touch test. If a bewitched person is touched by his or her bewitcher and comes out of it, it's proof that the person who touched them was the same person who had bewitched them. So that's not a good test. Witch's cake, where you take a little bit of the bewitched person's urine, mix it with rye meal and ashes, bake it into a cake, and feed it to the witch's familiar, their cat, dog, horse, goat, whatever. And the familiar will then fall under a spell that requires them to reveal the witch. And the witch can be revealed in all sorts of ways. But if y'all want to know that, you can go and research it, because in the interest of time and everything, right? Witches' marks, warts, moles, extra nipples, the way human beings are put together, and I'm not saying that we should all go out and do research on this, but you probably have a little bit anyway. If you look at the areola of a nipple, sometimes there are other bumps on there besides the nipple. If you have a prominent bump, an extra nipple, so to speak, that's a witch's tit. If you have a wart on your nose, that's a witch's tit. If you have a mole on your back or a skin tag, that's a witch's tit. If you have a birthmark on your leg, that's a witch's tit. And it's there to suckle the devil and the familiars, of course. And there are other methods of inquisition, plenty of other methods of inquisition to determine whether someone is a witch or not. And sometimes the person, the suspect, so to speak, the person who's suspected of being a witch, does not survive the methods of inquisition. But what does it matter? If they do survive, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. Anyway, bad news, huh? The Salem witch trials in what later became the United States of America and the colony of Massachusetts may have been a consequence of a grain disease, or wheat disease. May have been a consequence of contaminated bread. There have been a number of studies that have linked what went on, the symptomologies and things that were described by the bewitched accusers in the Salem witch trials to a wheat disease. And the wheat disease is ergot. It's a blight. It's a fungus that grows on wheat. And an alkaloid is found in ergot. That alkaloid is called ergotamine. And ergotamine is D-lysergic acid amide, which served as a model for the lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD, which is a total synthetic, but it's based on the lysergic acid amide, which is found in the ergot, the ergotamine. Symptoms that are associated with ergotism are known as St. Anthony's fire. You get swelling in your joints and inflammation. You have your palms of your hands burn and your feet burn. You get fevers. You become delusional. You hallucinate. Some people have convulsions. In Salem, those symptoms were blamed on witchcraft. And the women, and they were all women who were accused of this heinous practice, were sent to the gallows. And there were only like 16 people executed, if I remember correctly, in the Salem witch trials. There weren't that many. Of course, one's too many for something as ridiculous as this shit. But in Europe, there were thousands and thousands who were put to death for mental illness, for practicing herbal medicine, because people had a grudge against them, because they were Jews, and a lot of people went to their death for these reasons. Witchcraft. Can't suffer a witch to live. Nowadays, when we think of hallucinogens, we don't think about them so much as a magical thing, which they've been thought of forever. And I can't even say that. Let me backtrack. Nowadays, we have better ideas of the clinical implications of why people have these types of symptomologies when they've taken these type of drugs, why they manifest themselves experientially and behaviorally the way that they do. And two general ones of the 21st century, and these are pretty much modern ideas about thinking about hallucinogens, is to cut them into two big classes and classify them by their effects, or maybe better said, for their hoped-for outcomes, their hoped-for effects. And one is using these things as an entheogen. An entheogen is generating the divine within, is unlocking spiritual potential, moving into the spiritual world, etc. Bill Wilson, one of the co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous, was involved in LSD therapy in the 70s before he died. Bill Wilson was a carry a Bible with you everywhere type of Christian. He might not have even been welcome in most modern AA meetings because he toted the Bible around with him as much as he did the big book. So tying in the uses of these psychedelics into somehow generating a spiritual experience or opening one up to the possibility of a cosmic experience of connecting with the divine, or whatever. And we could talk for weeks on that one, probably do a whole course on that one. And then a second desired outcome is entactogen, which is generating empathy and openness. And this is one of the things that have been that these drugs have been touted since their discovery. Albert Hofmann, who discovered lysergic acid diethylamide, the synthetic, manufactured it from the ergotine molecule. He was a firm believer up until his death that LSD and other psychedelics of this type would be terrifically useful in opening you up to spiritual experiences, and would be terrifically useful at taking down your ego barriers in therapy, so that you can get to empathy, to openness, to honesty, etc., through chemicals, kind of a altered state truth serum, if you will. And sure enough, you have no ego defense systems if you're on this type of thing. People who take ecstasy, for instance, talk about wanting to be close to people, touching people, not necessarily in a sexual way, but deriving deep satisfaction from proximity, from touch, and all that kind of thing. More pragmatically, these are drugs that can be broken down by their molecular structure and categorized that way. They can be broken down by their effects and categorized that way. They can be broken down by the way you use them and categorized that way. They can be broken down by their history and categorized that way. So when you're talking about putting these into categories, then you're talking about kind of a Herculean task, because some of them fit in more than one category, but all of these categorizations are basically generalizations. For instance, indole hallucinogens. Indoles are the indole nucleus is hydroxytryptamine, 5-hydroxytryptamine molecule, which is serotonin, and psilocybin, which is the active agent, the first active agent we encounter in the magic mushroom, is based on that molecular structure. And so is D-lysergic acid diethylamide, which is LSD. Also, lysergic is misspelled in this thing. I didn't notice that initially, but it is. D-lysergic acid diethylamide. And these are called indoles because they mimic the indole nucleus, and they bind at indole receptors in the brain. Indoles are analogs of 5-hydroxytryptamine. They include psilocybin, magic mushrooms, LSD, and others. Lysergic acid diethylamide, by the way, is a synthetic, but is molecularly related to ergotamine that you find in blighted grain. And here's the blighted grain. This is ergot. This is the fungus that's growing here on a grain of rye. And when it was baked into bread and eaten in Salem, in the village, a bunch of kids, a bunch of people came down with the symptoms of St. Anthony's fire that we talked about earlier, and it was blamed on witchcraft. Factoid, just in case you're ever on Jeopardy or something. You may have noticed that the acronym LSD doesn't really match the spelled out chemical name of D-lysergic acid diethylamide. And that's because the chemist who first synthesized it was Dr. Albert Hofmann. He spoke German. More precisely, Schweizerdeutsch, which is a High German dialect that they speak in Switzerland. And in German, this drug is Lyserg saure diethylamide. Acid is sour, hence the LSD is the acronym for Lyserg saure diethylamide. And for 200, Alex. Oh, Alex isn't there anymore. That's too bad. It's also really not a good idea to use yourself as a test subject. Hoffman took a small, which was actually large, given the drug's potency dose. He took what he thought was a small dose and recorded the experience. Talked about the time distortions, the perceptual distortions, how long it took him to get home on his bicycle. I mean, this guy was a straight-up nerd. He rode a bicycle to work, probably had taped glasses and carried a pocket protector, I don't know, brown bag to lunch. He was not, out there being all wild and crazy with lysergic acid diethylamide. But he experienced a marked desire to laugh. Am I in the right place? Let me see. Yeah, I guess I am. It's a little further on in the lecture, but I need to touch on it here. He gave himself what he thought was a small dose. Actually, it's a pretty large dose because all it takes, LSD is a very potent substance, and it only takes 30 to 150 micrograms to produce a hallucinogenic experience. We have some drugs that it takes very, very, very little of it to do, to produce profound effects in a human being. Another one is fentanyl and carfentanil. It takes just the tiniest of touches of that stuff to produce a profound response in a human, and it takes just a small amount to produce an overdose situation and a fatal overdose situation. With LSD, you don't have to worry about fatalities, and it doesn't really matter how much you take as long as you take the 30 to 150 micrograms. And we'll talk about that a little more at length when we go on. There's a ceiling effect to the intoxication, and it's terrifically difficult to overdose on LSD, which is very, very lucky for Hoffman, which is the moral of the story. If he had discovered fentanyl and gave himself a dose like that, we'd have never heard of it. We'd only heard that he died, an overdose. So what does one do with such a drug? You got this profoundly mind-altering substances now. What do you want to do with it? Well, one of the first things they wanted to do with it was give it to an alcoholic, right? See, I don't know why we lend ourselves to being such guinea pigs for everything. But we also tested it on guinea pigs who didn't know they were guinea pigs. And this is a problem with research. Science has not always been the good guy when it comes to looking at research. For instance, on the right here, after World War I and the development of nuclear weapons, which, by the way, our nation has been the only nation on planet Earth to ever use them on another country. We dropped 2 of them on Japan. And they were small potatoes compared to the arsenal we have now. But right after World War II, there was a huge proliferation of above-ground testing. The United States was doing most of it, but China and Russia were involved in it too. And nations are still working to develop nuclear weapons, North Korea being one of those that are making us crazy now. India has nuclear weapons. Pakistan has nuclear weapons. Some of the former Russian republics have nuclear weapons. Doesn't do your heart good to think about Kazakhstan being nuclear armed, that kind of thing. Anyway, so nuclear testing was going on, and there were above ground detonations, and we were doing some studies. You can see these soldiers in the foreground who were in combat gear, and they're watching the explosion off in the distance. And they were out there in trenches. And they'll detonate that explosion. We built towns, and put people and cars and stuff in them to see what the blast would do when it hit these towns. And these soldiers would go in and measure blast radiuses and damage and what happened and record all of this and that. When the blast went off, they'd have a certain period of time before the shock wave gets to them. And then they would duck below the level of the trenches, the top of the trench, and the shock wave would pass harmlessly over them. And any fire that came along with it would pass harmlessly over them. Now, if the blast was detonated above them, it would smush them like insects. It would incinerate them. There wouldn't be anything left. Ducking down behind and into their earth shelters, the force of the blast would go over them, and then they'd crawl out and do all of their testing and stuff and gather data, all for the good of science and the military, and also training. What would happen if you were in a war zone where they detonated a nuclear blast? And they thought that's what they were studying. In a sense, they were. They did provide a lot of good data of that, but we could have got that data otherwise. What was actually being studied was what happened to men who were exposed to nuclear radiation for periods of time, particularly on a battlefield. And we know what happened to them. All of the soldiers who were involved in that test, unless they were killed in car wrecks or some other misadventure, died of cancer related to exposure to radioactive material. And their families were compensated for that. I even hate making a statement like their families were compensated for that, like they could be, right? Anyway, nod, nod, wink, wink. We don't ever do that kind of thing anymore. Over here, again, in the military, soldiers in a chow line getting fed. What will LSD do to people who are under combat conditions? What will it do to people? Just what does it do? How's it look? What if you're not expecting it and we hit you with some LSD? So you went to chow one morning with F Troop, and every fourth guy got a dose of LSD with his shit on the shingles. So it's 1, 2, 3 LSD, 1, 2, 3 LSD, 1, 2, 3 LSD, 1, 2, 3 LSD, etc., etc., etc. And if you get hit with a dose of LSD and you don't know it's coming, you're pretty sure you're out of your mind, that you've gone crazy, that something horrible is happening to you. Even if you like the effects of LSD, no one likes to have this come at them out of the blue. It's too intense. It's crazy making. And it was a horrible thing to do to soldiers who, have shown up and suited up to do what they can for their country. A big hoop-de-doo around LSD research, etc., is what will it do to people in positions of national security? Will they spill their guts about things? If you give this to people who are, will this be a truth serum? Will this cause them to talk, to spill state secrets, whatever? And they took Frank Olson, a biochemist who was also a soldier, mustered out of the military, went to work for the War Department, wound up being a contractor for the CIA and all that good stuff. And one night, a couple of agents dosed his drink with LSD. Just see what would happen, just to see if Dr. Olson would say anything. It was years, by the way. They didn't come right out and admit this. It was years before it was dragged out of them. In 1953, Dr. Olson, after being dosed with LSD, took a swan dive out of the Stafford Hotel here. I think he was on the 5th floor up in this area somewhere, to the sidewalk. And his death was considered a suicide. His wife and children had a hard time with that because their husband and father was not a suicidal man. He was not a depressive, any of that kind of stuff. As years went on and investigations went on, this was in 1953, I believe, that this happened, maybe 1954, when Olson did his suicide. And then by the mid-70s, everybody knew it wasn't a suicide. But the story went like, oh, Dr. Olson jumped. Oh, no, Dr. Olson fell. Dr. Olson was pushed out of the window, probably by a couple of guilty agents who had an experiment going wrong. That's my conjecture, by the way. The government never admitted to doing anything wrong, but they compensated Dr. Olson's family to the tune of a couple of million, but without admitting they did anything bad. They just, out of the goodness of their heart, gave them our money that we pay in taxes, right? The Stafford Hotel now is the Hotel Philadelphia in New York. Is still there, and it's still a murder scene where Dr. Olson was killed. The hotel owner originally, when they said it was suicide, expressed astonishment as how someone in total darkness could run across the room and fling himself with unerring accuracy through a closed window that had the curtains drawn, past 2 beds, a table, some chairs, and out the window in the dark. I think he had a point. Anyway, that's lysergic acid diethylamide. And there's a really cool movie, if you're into this sort of thing, called Jacob's Ladder that came out in the 90s. It's scary as hell, or at least I thought it was scary as hell. So you might want to take that in consideration before you watch it. I can't think of the guy's name that started it, Tim something. Anyway, there's only one LSD. Yep, it's a synthetic that was manufactured from the chemical structure of ergotine, and that's what it is. It's D25 lysergic acid diethylamide tartrate. Wait a minute. I can hear you out there. There's 25, 624, barrel, window pane, purple haze, brown star, blotter, goofy, green goddess, white lightning, Owsley, sunshine, 4-way, microdot, and about a zillion others. And you're right. But all of these are ways, are methods, are products that deliver the same active agent, the same psychoactive agent, and that is D-lysergic acid diethylamide. And like whiskey is one thing, and beer is another thing, and wine is even another thing. They all are delivering ethyl alcohol. That's the active agent, the psychoactive substance inside those products that cause the reaction from people who are taking it. This is how you do 25 or white lightning or 624. You drop it on a sugar cube. If you're going to do window pane, you put it into a gel cap or onto a gelatin delivery system. If you're doing blotter acid, Goofy Green Star, any of that, you put it on little stickers or little pieces of paper and put it on your tongue. Some people drop it in their eye, but that's asking for an eye infection. LSD, the drug, is high potency, 30 to 150 micrograms. If you can pick up and walk off with 200 pounds, you might be able to carry enough LSD to stone everyone on the planet. I don't know. I don't know if the dosage was spread that thin, but let's just say it's really strong. And when you take it, you don't have to take much, and in a little while, you'll start getting off. But you do build a rapid tolerance to it, and that's in an acute situation, particularly. I don't think people do it enough, really, to develop, chronic tolerances to it. It's got a low overdose potential and it's got a low addiction potential. The highs are intense. They last 6 to 8 hours. You don't want to walk around like that all the time. It's something that you do every once in a while. It's like a toxic vacation. You want to take a day off, this is a good way to do it. But you don't want to fill all 7 days doing this kind of thing. In fact, the proper way to do LSD, let me speak to the low ceiling effect too, regarding dosages. You may have someone who comes in to your office, and a little fry baby, for instance, who will boast a little bit about how he can hold his acid. I can take 4 or 5 hits at a time, man, and I do, and I handle it because I can manage that kind of thing. You don't have to say it to him, but you can think it. Well, who can't? Anyone can say that, because in terms of the effect that you're experiencing, the intoxication level that you're experiencing, 1 hit's going to get you there. 2 hit is not going to take you any higher. 3 hits is not going to take you any higher. 4 hits is not going to take you any higher, because you're going to be at the ceiling. You're going to be at the max. You're going to be feeling the experience that you're feeling, and that's going to top it out. If you take 3 or 4 hits, they're going to metabolize out at the same rate as 1. It's not like it's going to keep you up for days and days, So basically what you're doing when you take those hits is throwing your acid away. To do LSD properly, you should never take it more than 2, maybe 3 times a week at the outside. You should space it with days so that you take 1 hit, take a day or 2 off, and then take another hit, if you're going to do it that way. Because if you do it in shorter times, then you have less intense highs. You don't get as high as you would. You don't get the full effect of your drug because you have an acute tolerance that you built up by taking the dosages too close together. So it's kind of unique in that way. And we're going to be looking at some other psychedelic drugs here in a few minutes, that if you take them 2 or 3, 4 or 5 dosages simultaneously, you're not going to survive it. You'll die. Belladonna is the drug that I'm thinking of, which is also used as a poison. It's a very effective poison. Kill the hell out of you. Hallucinogen persisting perception disorder. this is what we used to call, and which I still call, flashbacks. And flashback is you took some acid a few days ago and you had a nice trip and everything was groovy and all of that stuff. But now you're driving to work on a Tuesday and boom, right out of the blue, for no reason, you're tripping again. And you're under the effects that you had several days ago when you took the Brown Star or the Goofy or, whatever you took. And you have a recurrence of symptoms. You have hallucinations. You're seeing things, hearing things. Your perceptions are altered. You have false perception of movement. You're sitting at the red light feeling like you're going 100 miles an hour. You see colors in very intensified ways. Things melt. Objects walk away from you. And while you're not under the influence of LSD or other psychedelics, and they just come back for whatever reason. And I know people who've had those. I've never had one myself. And the likelihood of having them decreases the further you get away from your last drug use, so that it's not going to happen to you a year later because too much time has elapsed. Yeah. A much more likely consequence of psychedelic use than flashback is panic attack, and suddenly having just crushing fear come down on you. And this happens with a significant portion of users, and this happens while you're using sometimes. It's called a bad trip. It happens while you're using. And bad trips can be intense and horrible. But there's a mechanism that we have, and it's a protective mechanism. We don't have a lot of ego defenses when we take a hallucinogenic drug. They fall away by the wayside, and we're vulnerable to things, Timothy Leary and Dr. Richard Alpert, who later became known as Baba Ram Das, were conducting research studies at Harvard. I think it was Harvard, maybe in Yale. I think it was Harvard. Anyway, prestigious Ivy League school. And they were working with psilocybin, and they did what we've already, decided that you shouldn't do. They used themselves as test subjects, felt like they couldn't really understand the experience unless they went there too. And really got into it. But when Tim Leary made his famous 60s pronunciation that we should turn on, tune in, and drop out, and I believed him, he suggested that if you're going to trip with acid, that you have like a designated sane person with you, so that 6 of us are together and 5 of us are going to trip. We have one person who doesn't, who's there just, as a safety measure for the rest of us. And we can take turns doing that. He doesn't have to be sober all the time, but he can. Wouldn't hurt me. Just means I don't have to not be sober one night. This is to make sure that if you get into a bad place or you start escalating, that someone's there to talk you down, to help you. Because when you're tripping, and things are getting intense, and you're seeing things that maybe you don't like seeing, and you have the transparent eyelid syndrome, where you close your eyes, but you can still see what you're seeing, and then you put your hands over your eyes, and you can see through your hand too, and still see what you're seeing. It can be kind of bad, but you have a little voice stuck in the back of your head that says something along the lines of, "Chill, Howard, you're not crazy, you dropped acid." And I go, "Oh, yeah, I did." Or I have someone there that's helping me out. "This isn't real, man. You dropped acid." "Oh, okay." And that's for a bad trip. Honestly, I've never had a bad trip. But and I've never needed to pull myself back from it. But it has gotten intense, and I've had to say, "It's the acid, Howard." Hard to explain. Psilocybin is another hallucinogen. This is what Ram Dass and Leary were working on in their studies. Psilocybin is the magic mushroom of Mexico and the Southwest. It's also known as, like I said, by the Nahuatl word Teonanacatl. It means God's flesh, and it takes you into the spirit world, because when you eat God's flesh, you swallow God, and then you see with the eyes of God. You see the infinity of the universe, and you walk into the spirit world, the way the world really is, the way God sees it, not the way we organize it. The first stage metabolite of psilocybin is psilocin, which is a much more powerful hallucinogen than psilocybin, and it provides the intensity of the high. I was talking to an acquaintance about this, and she said, that I get it. That's why when you drink some mushroom tea, after about, like within 10 minutes, you're throwing up, and then you're feeling something, and then in a little while, it's just like zoom, you take off. And I said, yeah, that's kind of the way it works. And in zoom, you take off. You can dry these mushrooms and chew them later, eat them later. You can brew them into tea. You can put them in your food. I used to do them. I wash them off real good, because they grow in cow poo, so you want to make sure you wash them off real good. And just cut them up into cubes and eat them like pills, washing them down with Budweiser. That way you don't have to taste them unless you burp or throw up, and then you'll taste them. And they taste horrible, just FYI, in case you've never had the experience. This is one variety of psilocybin. This is the kind you'll find in the Texas cow pasture, the Texas cow pasture shrooms. They're little brown mushrooms. A lot of them look like this one. But the key telling agent about these, I've met mushroom aficionados who tell me about how you can pinch them and determine by the electric bruise whether it's a psilocybin or not, or the striations on the bottom of the cap will help you make a determination of whether it's a psilocybin or not. These characteristics really don't identify these as psilocybin mushrooms. There are plenty of other toxic mushrooms that look just like them, and have the same characteristics and fit that exact same description. So you're playing with fire if that's the way you're making a determination. The best way of identifying Psilocybe cubensis, which is this little booger, is that it grows in this, which is cow poo. And that's how you tell. And of course, you want to wash them real good, because they grow in cow poo. And those are also indole. Along with those, you have morning glory seeds, and this is a morning glory. It's a pretty flower, and they grow around here too. I see them over by Pine Gully Park when I go out on my walks and things early in the morning. And they are morning glories. They bloom in the morning and close up at night usually. The seeds are psychoactive. They carry this, and the seeds that you find, the psychoactive agent that you find in morning glories are the same one that you find in the wheat blight, the ergotine. The active psychoactive agent is D-lysergic acid amide. And these are known as heavenly blues, flying saucers, ololoquy, all referring to the same thing. You have seeds of the Hawaiian baby wood rose that's also packed with D-lysergic acid amide. And they also have a fuzzy covering on their seeds that if you eat that, it will cause nausea and cramps, as well as the hallucinations from the amide. Cohiba snuff, you see it being used here up at the top. This is known as yopa, and is a powder that's made from the ground seeds over here of the cohaba tree. It's snorted. If you have the chemical, the liquid chemical, you usually inject it because if you swallow it, the digestion basically breaks it down before it's able to have any real effect. It's also known as the businessman's lunch because it's a real short, intense high, the businessman's trip, the businessman's acid. It's not widely used in the United States, but it's a pretty handy drug for people who like to take even shorter vacations than a one-day one, because you can take off for lunch, do some DMT, trip your brains out, and come back from your trip and in time to close the deal this afternoon. You know, you're not gone long. It's an intense high of about an hour or so's duration. So short, intense, hallucinogenic episodes. And it takes you into the spirit world. There's a good movie. It's an old movie. It came out in 1985, but those of you that are interested in kind of, offbeat films, it's about a young boy who is kidnapped by Indians and Amazonia along the Amazon River basin. And anyway, he's raised with the I think it's the Bat people, B-A-T, not B-A-D. He does 2 hallucinogenic episodes, or 3, where he's introduced to Yopa. And the medicine man fills a reed with some of the powder, and he's on his knees, and there are 2 companions on the right, holding on to him so he doesn't flop down and stuff. And when he blows the green powder into the kid's nose, in a relatively short time, he's communicating with the frogs and running with the jaguars and soaring with the eagles, and it's all in the head. It's not a real transformational shape-shifting event or anything like that. But that's Yopa. And Yopa takes you, again, into the spirit world, where you can communicate with the animals, and you can communicate with the gods and the forest and the trees and the river, etc. Anyway, the film's called The Emerald Forest. There are other tryptamines that are in use. Ayahuasca, also known as the devil's breath, has dimethyltryptamine in it. 5-methoxy-N-diisopropyl tryptamine. I have a trip all over that pronunciation all the time. 5-methoxy-N-diisopropyl tryptamine is foxymethoxy on the streets around, and has been for decades. Alpha-methyltryptamine, and these are not widely used drugs here, but they are used in the Americas, and these are used more in South America than they are in North America. And the devil's breath is, a powder usually. And there was a thing on Vice television about devil's breath. You could probably look it up on YouTube, and how devil's breath is used to. You remember I said you have the drug that makes you feel close to other people, that lowers your ego defenses. Well, here's the way you use devil's breath. You walk by, say, a wealthy American tourist, and if you're down there and you're American, your first name is American, your second name is Dollars, and you walk by an American and say, "Hi, good morning, how are you?" And the American looks up and smiles at you and says, "I'm fine, yourself?" And the guy will blow a handful of powder into your face. This is the devil's breath. You'll inhale. And when you do, you'll start tripping. And now this guy's your best buddy. And he will say, I sure would like to, for you to come with me over to the ATM and take out the maximum money you can on your card and give it to me. And you'll say, sure, I'd love to do that. And here's the keys to my car, too. And you can take, and this is the card to my room at my hotel, 217. And you can go in there and get all my stuff there, too. So it's a pretty handy thing to talk people into doing things they otherwise wouldn't do. I don't know how valid that is. I haven't done any fact checking to see if that's a thing, or if it was a thing, or if it was an isolated incident, or if it's a pattern or whatever. But it's a pretty good program. Catechol hallucinogens are based on the dopamine molecular structure, and these are where you get some of your designer drugs and things like that. DOM, which is dimethoxy-4-methylamphetamine, also known as STP when it initially came out. 3,4-methylene dioxyamphetamine, or MDA, and that's the parent drug of ecstasy and a lot of the designer drugs, the psychoactive amphetamines that came after. MDA, I remember people said about it on the streets back in the early 70s is MDA, we called it miracle drug of America. It'd make you feel so many ways you'd have to like one or two of them. And then there was methylene dioxymethamphetamine, or MDMA, which we commonly call ecstasy, and trimethoxyphenylethylamine, which is mescaline, the active agent in the peyote cactus. And these are drugs that occupy and shut down, or they occupy and trigger. And dopamine neuropathways at dopamine receptor sites. Catechols include peyote. This is the hallucinogenic cactus of the Southwest that Quanah Parker was an aficionado of. It's integral to the rituals of the Native American church, to the peyoteros, which was protected for a long time up until the 90s. It's gone back and forth. And to tell you the truth, I don't really know where it is right now, whether this is protected by the Religious Freedoms Clause or not. It should be, because it's a legitimate religious ritual. But whether it's legal or not, they still do it. In the early 90s, there was a case where there was basically a licensed chemical dependency counselor. It wasn't an LCDC, wasn't what it was called then, but it was in Oregon or California, I can't recall, but it was a Klamath Indian, and he was a peyotero in the Native American church, worshipped in the Native American church, and he had lost his job because they claimed he wasn't, they required their counselors to be sober and not engage in the use of intoxicants. And he said that he was sober. He didn't use illegal drugs or do anything illegal, that he only took peyote because it was a ritual in his church as part of his belief system. So that was a hue and a cry, and I think he finally got his license reinstated, but at that time he didn't want it anymore, and he's like, screw y'all, I'm going home. The active agent the intoxicant that you find in this cactus is mescaline. The whole cactus, by the way, is psychedelic. You eat these little buds on it. It's got fruit that grows on it. You can eat them. It's got flowers that grow on it. They don't give you much, but you can eat them anyway. Below the ground, there are roots to this cactus that you can cut up and let it dry and chew them, and they work fine. So you can gobble up the whole thing. There's nothing that you need to throw away when you're doing peyote. And it'll make you drool, and it'll make you nauseous, and you'll probably vomit, but then it will cause you to trip. You can also extract the mescaline from the cactus and use it in a powder or a liquid form. You can put it into pills and swallow it. This has been used by curers, healers, curanderos, brujas and brujos all over North America and South and Central America. Mescaline is used a lot or the peyote rather is used a lot in traditional and approaches to healing, herbal healing and things like that. Carlos Castaneda wrote some books about the use of psychedelics and the teachings of Don Juan, who was his mentor, as Castaneda, who's I think he's from Venezuela, if I'm not mistaken, or Peru. He may be Peruvian, but he studied in the American Southwest. He died in America, and he came here and became a citizen. But he wrote the teachings of Don Juan and the adventures of Don Juan, or something along those lines. He had several books, but he claimed to be a shaman and a sorcerer in Toltec traditional healing and magic. You'll also find catechol hallucinogens in the San Pedro cactus, which is in Mexico and up to Texas, New Mexico. I think even into California you can find the San Pedro cactus. And the active agent in that is mescaline as well. You have catechol, amphetamine derivatives, and these are synthetic psychedelics. When you see a pill that looks like this, any of these, it can be any damn thing, anything. It can be a sweet tart for all we know, because these are easy to press pills. You can put any kind of ingredients in them. We have no way of controlling that. If you have a pill factory that's set up in like a rental shed at the local store your furniture cheap place. But if they're putting together amphetamine derivatives, now you're getting into the alphabet soup things, the MDA, DOM, MDMA sort of drugs that you can tinker with these substances for the properties that you want them to have, and you can make alterations in it. When we're looking at these as catechol amphetamine derivatives as hallucinogens, we should also remember that they're speed, so that when you're taking this, you're also getting the effects of the amphetamine. And like other stimulants, when you take them and you trip and have your little run, when they wear off, you're going to have a depression that you don't find with some of the other types of hallucinogenics or other psychedelic substances, and that's because of the rebound effect that you get with amphetamine, not because of the hallucinogenic effect that you've had. With these drugs, like again, most of the stimulants and most of the hallucinogenics, or LSD anyway, you're not going to run much, if any, risk of overdose. And there's little risk of addiction potential. People don't do these, excuse me, day in, day out, but most of the time. So you don't see people, and there's not a real profound withdrawal from taking the amphetamine derivatives as hallucinogens. Then you have N-methyl-DL aspartate, or NMDA, antagonists. And they're antagonists because they block action at the NMDA sites. Phenylcyclohexylpiperidine, or phencyclidine, PCP, is the one that jumps immediately to mind. This is the evil angel dust. It produces psychosis by blocking NMDA receptors. And you hear a bunch of things about, about drugs that are mythological. There's a lot of misinformation floating around out there. Like the whole thing about taking LSD causes people to be delusional and they believe they can fly and they jump off of buildings. And that might have been what happened to Dr. Olson and crap like that. Not really. These drugs will make you kind of superhuman, or they'll make you psychotic and murderous. Some of them have an effect of lowering inhibition and increasing aggression, like alcohol, and that could lead to trouble. But I don't know of any that makes you superhuman, but PCP will make you psychotic and aggressive and somewhat impervious to pain. Because PCP was initially developed as an anesthesia, and that's what they wanted to use it for, as a short-acting anesthetic. But it wasn't that short-acting, and it had some really unpleasant and undesirable side effects, which is the hallucination and the psychosis and the aggression and stuff like that. I saw a guy arrested on Highway 146. This could have been an episode of Cops, except we were coming home from work one day, and I was riding with some other guys. We were working for Speedy Rovers out at Tide's Shipyard doing some contract work. And the road was blocked off at this ice house in San Leon. It was, I think it was the Rockin' A or Lazy A or something like that. It was ice house on 146. And when we got stopped, there were, traffic jam. There was a guy running down the middle of the road, barefooted, with his shirt open. He's pumping his arms in the air like Rocky running up the steps there in Philadelphia. And it's wintertime, it's November, about this time of year, and it was a little colder than it is now. But, he was barefooted, he was wet, he was muddy. And the cops were apprehending him. So the guy I was riding with, Bones, he turns off on the side road. We wound up at that ice house, and there was a guy standing over there. There was a truck in the ditch across the road, and the guy was the driver of the truck. And he had been bitten several times. It was like, it was like an episode of The Walking Dead. He sees this guy coming up to his truck. He rolls the window down, and the guy jumps in and starts biting him and stuff. And he freaks out and tries to drive away. He managed to get across Highway 146, and he was trying to turn, but he hit the ditch, and it slung the guy off. And the man jumped out and ran back across the road to safety. And when the police got there, this guy was, doing the Rocky thing. And a plainclothes cop was telling him something and putting his finger out the window pointing at him, and he had a walkie-talkie in his hand, and the guy slapped his walkie-talkie out of his hand. Well, that pissed him off. And he got out of the car, and I'll never forget this thing, because he's a huge guy in a little car. And he gets out wearing a light blue leisure suit. Some of you don't know what I'm talking about, but some of you do. And he gets out wearing a light blue leisure suit that had been out of style for several years by now. And anyway, he tries to apprehend this guy by smacking him with one of those large police officer flashlights. And he smacked him hard enough several times to cause his flashlight to fall apart, and the batteries flew everywhere, which is a big deal, by the way, because those are some sturdy lights. The young fellow had the guy by the throat and was throttling him and taking him down to his knees. And this guy was considerably bigger than him. A county mountie showed up, got out of the car, got an axe handle out of the back. And later on in the news, they said, that he had not done anything like that, but he had. I watched him. and he worked the guy over with an axe handle. And they finally, by sheer force of numbers, they got this guy down and they handcuffed him hand and foot and threw him in the back of the squad car. And the last I saw of him, he was trying to break the back window out with his face. So apparently he wasn't feeling much pain, and he was terrifically psychotic, and he was very aggressive, and that's PCP. When the police officers in the South Central, after the South Central riots, when the police officers were acquitted of assault in the Rodney King case that sparked the South Central riots, is what I'm trying to say, were acquitted, then all hell broke loose in Los Angeles and South Central. But one of the cops, I'll remember, if you looked at tapes of the Rodney King incidents, it's brutal. You got like 5 cops standing around this guy beating him, and he won't stay down. He's trying to get up. And one of the cops in his testimony, I can't remember which one, said, "I was scared to death. This is a big guy, and I thought he was on angel dust, and I thought he was dusted, and I was scared to let him get up." And even though that's brutal and ugly, they teach you in famous policeman school that if a person, won't stay down, force him to stay down. And if you have to use that kind of force and he keeps trying to get up, you hit him till he stops trying to get up, until you've got him subdued. Given the incidences of police violence over the years, particularly against minorities, and the tendency to think that maybe they're on drugs, this creates a volatile situation as well. Normally, it's not something, that an officer runs into, but it does. It does happen. And with angel dust, there's more truth to the rumor than fiction in terms of the behavior. But there are other NMDA antagonists that are out there too. Ketamine, which is usually used as a pre-sedation drug, it also causes you to have forgetfulness, so that they can mix ketamine in if you're doing some kind of semi-anesthetic procedure, like you're getting a colonoscopy or something. It causes you to not remember what happened when it was going on. It also has pain relief properties. On the street, you might hear ketamine referred to as cat or special K. Memantine is a drug that's used primarily for moderate to severe Alzheimer's disease, and it helps with the memory problems and with functioning. But it also can produce some trippiness. And dextromethorphan, which is primarily used as an antitussive, but you take enough dextromethorphan and you're probably going to hallucinate too. And that's because it's an NMDA antagonist. Then you have anticholinergic psychedelics. And anticholinergics are things like atropa, hyoscyamus, mandragora, and datura. And these are plants for the most part. Atropa is this one, a pretty flower. It's Atropa belladonna. It's also known as the deadly nightshade. It can be and has been used as a poison because it's poison, it's toxic, and if you take too much, you die. It's also a key ingredient of the flying potion. Remember that flying potion we were talking about? The one that you smear on your naked body while you're riding your broomstick around the fire and hail Satan and whatever? That's the one you do. And the key psychoactive agent in that is atropine. Atropine is also an agent that counteracts the effects of neurotoxins, so that during the Gulf War, when everybody was afraid, Gulf War I and II for that matter, when people thought that Saddam Hussein was firing gas-loaded missiles into Israel, people were freaking out and doing atropine and having reactions to atropine because it is a nerve gas antidote. Some American soldiers also discovered in their medical kits that the atropine was missing because you can use it to get high with. Go figure. Mandrake. Aye! You got to put your earmuffs on when you pull that because the root will scream at you and cause you to faint and die and whatnot. Just kidding. That's from Harry Potter. This is a mandrake. And if you use your imagination, it kind of looks like a human figure. But these roots are, as you can see, there are various lengths and they're kind of spread out in the ground so that when you pull them up, they do shriek at you. They'll make a ree kind of noise. And they're valued in magic. They're in the flying potion too. And all the way back to the Bible and beyond. And they have 3 alkaloids in them that cause hallucinogenic experiences: hyoscyamine, scopolamine, and atropine. And this is the plant, by the way. You remember in the Bible when Jacob took off because he had swindled his brother Esau, and Esau wanted blood, and Jacob went on the run after cheating his brother out of his inheritance. And he went far away, and he met a guy that had 2 daughters, Leah and Rachel. Leah was the oldest one, but Rachel was young and more beautiful than Leah, and that's the one that Jacob fell in love with. So he negotiated a deal with the father, and if Jacob worked for him for 7 years, then he could marry Leah. And one of the things that Jacob was doing was helping him grow and harvest his mandrakes, right? Anyway, the old man cheated him. He got him drunk on the wedding night and took his bride back to him in the dark, and Jacob knew her. And next thing you know, when he woke up in the morning, it wasn't Rachel at all. It was Leah. He was married to the elder. And when he confronted his father-in-law said, I can't marry the young one first. It's Leah has to be married first. But if you'll agree to me to work with me for another 7 years, I'll let you marry Rachel, which he did. And 7 more years of mandrake farming and things like that. This is sometimes referred to as hand of glory, although hand of glory is also the left hand of a hanged person, right? Used in black masses and magic rituals and things like that. But this is sometimes referred to as that. Mandragora. And there are more anticholinergics of this family out there too. Jamestown weed up here at the top, also known as Jimson weed, that has psychedelic properties. The datura, the atropine, scopolamine, and hyoscyamine down here in the bottom left, and then on the right is henbane, Hyoscyamus niger, that has hyoscyamine as its hallucinogenic agent. And all of these plants, are like, they grow wild, so they're around. This brings us back. I told you that we would go a circle with this. This brings us back to Amanita muscaria, which has the muscalamine in it. And it's the magic mushroom of the Arctic Circle. And it's a pretty mushroom. Pretty distinctive by its red cap with the white specks on it. It's also called fly agaric because people noticed that flies would land on it and like suck the juice out of the mushroom cap, and then they'd fall off, and they thought it killed them. But if you pay careful attention to what happens to a fly when he does this, he just falls off and is unanimated for a period of time, an hour or so. He's 2, maybe 3 hours outside. Your fly is on vacation, and then he gets up and flies kind of crookedly away. Maybe he goes up on the ceiling and hangs out there for a while and hallucinates that he's an American actor named Jeff Goldblum or something. It didn't kill them, it just stoned them. And then away they went. Reindeer will sometimes get into the Amanita muscaria and then go to work for Santa Claus because now they can fly. People have been using these type of intoxicants, mushrooms and wild plants and things like that, ever since there have been human beings. That someone discovered this, someone chewed on it, someone ate it, and it was a big discovery. Now, something else that human beings discovered was that reindeer who were tripping on Amanita muscaria in Lapland will pee in the snow. And where they pee in the snow, there'll be salt licks, and it will harden. And, contrary to the advice of Frank Zappa about not eating the yellow snow way up north where the Huskies go, people did eat the yellow snow, and other animals did eat the yellow snow and tripped on Amanita muscaria, because if you were doing Amanita on Friday night, you can pee in a jug and save it for Saturday night. And then you drink the pee on Saturday night and you'll trip just like you did the night before. And then you pee back in the jug and save that pee for Sunday night. And on Sunday night, you can trip just like you did on Friday night. But by Monday night, the pee has lost its effectiveness and now you're just drinking pee. Kind of useful knowledge to have, is it not? And as muscimol is the active agent in that. And this is the last one, and this is Salvia divornium, or the diviner's sage. And it grows in Mexico at high elevations. It's up in the Oaxacan cloud forest, is where its natural habitat is. And it's used in shamanistic medicine. And the divornium is also used in in magic, religious ceremonies. So there you have it. In conclusion, psychedelics is a large category of substances. They include organic, semi-synthetic, and totally synthetic compounds, blends, substances, what have you. And these, the ones presented here, are representative of the psychedelic categories, and they are, but this is by no means a comprehensive presentation of all of the various extracts and compounds, etc., that make up the family. There are tons of psychedelics out there, tons of hallucinogenic drugs. And again, they come from plants, and they come from animals, and they come from laboratories, and they just keep on coming. Some of the drugs, like LSD, are almost impossible to overdose on. I mean, I have never heard of or seen a documented case of LSD causing an overdose death ever, anywhere. You'd have to do 5 gallons of it or something like that. So others like belladonna, however, are very toxic, and you can overdose and die on that. Some of the mushrooms that you eat even though they have psychedelic properties, also have cumulative toxins like strychnine in them. And what that means is, you can do some mushrooms today, and you won't feel any bad effect really, but you'll have strychnine in your system, and it's not going away. And then you'll do some more mushrooms, and that strychnine will stack on top of the other strychnine you have until you really begin to experience problems and maybe even die with it. And it's not, impossible to do that. These are drugs that are used to enhance spiritual experience, and they're used in animistic faiths, and they're used by traditional healers. So it's not something necessarily that people are doing like the peyoteros. They're not doing this, to party on a Saturday night. It's part of, a religious ceremony in which they're trying to get closer to God, or to, the spirit world, if you want to consider it that way. And these are generally considered to be non-addictive, at least in the physical sense. I've never seen anyone having physical withdrawal from any of these drugs. But anything that you do that feels good is subject to become, an obsessive compulsive thing with whoever's doing it. It makes me feel good, so I want to continue doing it because it makes me feel good. And when I stop doing it, just not feeling good feels bad. Does that make sense? And so that might be a component of it. But anyway, any questions? I don't hear any. But anyway, there's a huge category of drugs. And like other substances, hallucinogens wax and wane in popularity. And, you'll see peaks and valleys with drug use over time. And the number of people who use the drugs may increase and may decrease, but the number of people who are addicted to substances is pretty static. It's still relatively around 9 to 10% of the population that has those types of problems, which if you're in a nation that has around 300 million people, that's a lot of folks. So, anyway, I'll see you next time around, and we'll be talking about marijuana and marijuana products, and then we'll talk about performance-enhancing drugs a little bit, and then we'll call it a semester. You want to? Thought you might. All right. Well, take it easy. I'll see you soon.